Good evening, boys and girls, and welcome to our next edition of Tucked In Tuesday. If you remember from last week, at the very end when I read you the clue of who our guest reader was going to be, I told you we weren't going to have just one reader, we were going to have two readers this week, which is why we've got two chairs set up here. The clue I gave you was, these teachers' favorite character is a pig who is funny and likes buttery toast. I wonder who they could be. All right, so without further ado, our readers for this week are...
Good evening, boys and girls. Welcome to Tucked In Tuesday. Hopefully you got with our clue that it's Miss Adams and Mrs. Marshall. We are so excited to be reading with you guys today. And if you didn't know our favorite character that is a pig, that is silly and likes buttery toast, it's Mercy Watson. So if you haven't read any of those Mercy Watson books, check them out in our library. We have tons of them. Today, Mrs. Marshall and I are going to read to you a special kind of story. It's called You Read to Me, I'll Read to You. And they're short little stories that our partner read. So Mrs. Marshall will read some lines and I'll read some lines. And they're really fun, just little short stories. So we're going to read some of the short stories to you. We also have these books in our library, so make sure you check them out if you like them. So it's You'll Read to Me, I'll Read to You by Mary Ann Hoberman. You Read to Me, I'll Read to You by Mary Ann Hoberman. Introduction. Here's a book with something new. You read to me,
I'll read to you.
we'll read each page to one another. You'll read one side,
I'll the other.
but who will read, now guess this riddle, when the words are in the middle? That's easy.
Plain as pie. We'll read together, you and I.
The two mice. I see a mouse.
I see one too.
We see two mice. What shall we do? Let's give them names.
What shall they be?
Pipe and peep,
He and she?
dot and dash,
Squeal and squeak?
to and fro.
Hide and seek?
Two mice are nice.
Two mice are fun,
They're twice as nice.
as only one.
And when we read,
It's just the same.
two readers reading,
Make a game.
it's twice as nice.
When there are two,
You read to me, I'll read to you. The big cat. Oh my, I spy a great big cat.
a great big cat? I don't like that.
Run, mice, run.
Stay, cat, stay.
Oh, good, the mice have got away.
Now, Pussycat, that isn't nice. You shouldn't scare the little mice.
We know you want them for your food, but eating mice is really rude.
It's not a proper thing to do. Why, what if someone gobbled you?
Think how sad your friends would feel if you were eaten for a meal.
We'll give you cream, your very own, if you will leave the mice alone.
And when you're done and full and fat, we'll find a book about a cat.
A cat like you with fluffy fur, who laps up cream and loves to purr.
And lives inside a little house and never ever dines on mouse. We both will read the book to you. The mice can sit and listen too. I hate my hat. I hate my hat.
I think it's nice.
I hate my hat.
You've said that twice.
I hate my hat.
Now that's a third.
I hate my hat.
I hate that word.
You hate that word? What word is that?
That word you said.
You mean my hat?
No, not your hat. Your hat looks great. I like your hat. It's hate. I hate.
But not my hat? You don't hate that?
Of course I don't. I like your hat.
You like my hat?
I said I do. I think your hat looks good on you.
You like my hat?
I like it fine. I like your hat. Do you like mine?
Why, yes, I do. It suits your head. Now let's do something else instead.
Something else we both would like?
Let's wear our hats and ride a bike.
That sounds good. We'll take a snack.
What should we do when we get back?
Something that we like to do. You read to me, I'll read to you.
The end. We're at the end.
The very end.
The very, very, very end. No more words.
Or pictures. Look,
No more stories.
in this book.
But there are other books to read.
Hundreds.
Thousands.
All we need, anytime, in any weather, we can sit right down together.
In the shade.
Or in the sun.
Choose a book.
That looks like fun.
One that's old.
Or one that's new.
Make believe.
Or really true.
I'll read one line.
I'll read two. You'll read to me. I'll read to you.
All right, now we are going to read Chapter 5 and Chapter 6 from Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. Chapter 5 is called The Birthday Bash. I got used to the way Fudge looked without his top front teeth. He looked like a very small first grader. Dr. Brown, our dentist, said he'd have to wait until he was 6 or 7 to get his grown-up teeth. I started calling him Fang because when he smiles, all you can see are the top side teeth next to the big space. So it looks like he has fangs. My mother didn't like that. I want you to stop calling him Fang, she told him. What should I call him, I asked. Farley Drexel. Just plain Fudge will be fine, my mother said. What's wrong with Farley Drexel, I asked. How come you named him that if you don't like it? I like it fine, my mother said, but right now we call him Fudge, not Farley, not Drexel, and not Fang. What's wrong with Fang, I asked. I think it sounds neat. Fang is an insult. Oh, come on, Mom. He doesn't even know what a fang is. But I know, Peter, and I don't like it. Okay. I promise never to call my brother Fang again. But secretly, whenever I look at him, I think it. My brother Fang Hatcher. Nobody can stop me from thinking. My mind is my own. Fudge is going to be 3 years old. My mother said he should have a birthday party with some of his friends. He plays with 3 other little kids who live in our building. There's Jenny, Ralph, and Sam. My mother invited them to Fudge's party. Grandma said she'd come over to help. My father couldn't make it. He had a Saturday business appointment. I wanted to go to Jimmy Fargo's, but my mother said she needed me to supervise the games. The kids were invited from 1 until 2:30. That's only an hour and a half, my mother reminded me. That's not so bad, is it, Peter? I don't know yet, I told her. Ask me later. The kitchen table was set up for the party. The cloth and napkins and paper plates and cups all matched. They had pictures of Superman on them. Right before party time, Grandma tried to change Fudge into his new suit. But he screamed his head off about it. No suit, no suit, no, no, no! My mother tried to reason with him. It's your birthday, Fudgy. All your friends are coming. You want to look like a big boy, don't you? While she was talking to him, she managed to get him into his shirt and pants. But he wouldn't let her put on his shoes. He kicked and carried on until my mother and grandmother were both black and blue. Finally, they decided as long as he was in his suit, his feet didn't matter, so he wore his old bedroom slippers. Ralph arrived first. He isn't even 4 years old. He doesn't say much either. He grunts and grabs a lot, though. So the first thing Ralph did was wander into the kitchen. He looked around for something to eat, but Grandma was guarding the place. She kept telling him, no, must wait until the other children come. Jenny arrived next. She was wearing little white gloves and party shoes. She even carried a pocketbook. Besides that, she had on dirty jeans and an old sweater. Her mother apologized for her clothes, but said she couldn't do anything with Jenny lately, especially since she had taken to biting. What does she bite? I asked, thinking about furniture or toys or stuff like that. She bites people, Jenny's mother said. But you don't have to worry about it unless her teeth go through the skin. Otherwise, it's perfectly safe. I thought, poor old Fudge, he can't even bite back since he hasn't got any top front teeth. I looked at Jenny. She seemed so innocent. It was hard to believe she was a vampire. Sam came last. He carried a big present for Fudge, but he was crying. It's just a stage he's going through, his mother explained. Everything scares him, especially birthday parties, but he'll be fine, won't you, Sam? Sam grabbed onto his mother's leg and screamed, Take me home! Take me home! Somehow, Sam's mother untangled herself from Sam's grip and left. So at 1:05, we were ready to begin. We had an eater, a biter, and a crier. I thought that 2:30 would never come. I also thought my mother was slightly crazy for dreaming up the party in the first place. Doesn't Fudge have any normal friends? I whispered. There's nothing wrong with Fudge's friends, my mother whispered back. All small children are like that. Grandma got them seated around the kitchen table. She put a party hat on each kid's head. Sam screamed, "Get it off! Get it off!" But the others wore their hats and didn't complain. My mother snapped a picture of them with her new camera. Then Grandma turned off the lights and my mother lit the candles on Fudge's cake. It had chocolate frosting and big yellow roses. I led the singing of Happy Birthday. My mother carried the cake across the kitchen to the party table and set it down in front of Fudge. Sam cried, "Too dark, too dark." So Grandma had to turn on the kitchen lights before Fudge blew out his candles. When he was finished blowing, he reached out and grabbed a rose off his cake. He shoved it into his mouth. "Oh, Fudge," my mother said, "look what you did." But Grandma said, "It's his birthday. He can do whatever he wants." So Fudge reached over and grabbed a second rose. I guess Ralph couldn't stand seeing Fudge eat those yellow roses because he grabbed one too. By that time, the cake looked pretty messy. My mother, finally coming to her senses, took the cake away and sliced it up. Each kid got a Dixie cup and a small piece of cake and some milk. But Jenny hollered, "Where's my rose? Want one too?" Because her slice of birthday cake didn't happen to have one. My mother explained that the roses were only decorations and there weren't enough to go around. Jenny seemed to accept that, but when Grandma stood over her to help open her Dixie, Jenny bit her on the hand. "She bit me!" Grandma cried. "Did it break the skin?" my mother asked. "No, I don't think so," Grandma said, checking. "Good, then it's nothing to worry about," my mother told her. Grandma went into the bathroom to put some medicine on it anyway. She wasn't taking any chances. Ralph was the first one to finish his food. "More, more, more," he sang, holding up his empty plate. "I don't think you should give him any more," I whispered to my mother. "Oh, Peter, this is a party. Let him eat whatever he wants." "Okay," I said. My mother served Ralph a second piece of cake. He threw up right after he finished it. Me and Grandma took the kids into the living room while my mother cleaned up the mess. Grandma told Fudge he could open his presents while his friends watched. Jenny brought him a musical Jack-in-the-Box. When you turn the handle around, it plays Pop Goes the Weasel. When you reach the part of the song about Pop, the top opens and a funny clown jumps up. Fudge loved it. He clapped his hands and laughed and laughed. But Sam, he started to scream. "No, no more, take it away!" He hid his face in his hands and wouldn't look up until Grandma promised to put the Jack-in-the-Box in another room. Fudge opened Ralph's presents next. It was a little wind-up car that ran all over the floor. I kind of liked it myself, and so did Ralph, because he grabbed it away from Fudge and said, "Mine!" "No!" Fudge shouted, "Mine!" When my mother heard the racket, she ran in from the kitchen. She explained to Ralph that he had brought the car to Fudge because it was his birthday. But Ralph wouldn't listen. I guess my mother was afraid he might throw up again, and this time on the living room rug. So she begged Fudge to let Ralph play with the car for a few minutes. But Ralph kept screaming it was his car, so Fudge started to cry. Finally, my mother took the car away and said, "Let's see what Sam brought you." Fudge liked that idea. He forgot about the little car as he ripped the paper and ribbon off Sam's package. It turned out to be a big picture dictionary, the same kind the Yarbies brought me a couple of months ago. Fudge got mad when he saw it. "No," he yelled, "no more book." He threw it across the room. "Fudge, that's terrible," my mother said. "You mustn't do that to the nice book." "No book," Fudge said. Sam cried. "He doesn't like it. He doesn't like my present. I want to go home. I want to go home." Grandma tried to comfort Sam while my mother picked up the book. She gathered the wrapping paper and ribbons and cards together. Fudge didn't even look at any of the birthday cards. Oh well, he can't read, so I guess it doesn't matter anyway. "Peter," my mother said, "let's start the games. Now, quick." I checked the time. I hoped the party was almost over, but no. It was only 1:30. Still an hour to go. I went into my room where I had blown up a lot of balloons. My mother had the party book, and it says 3-year-olds like to dance around with balloons. When I got back to the living room, Mom started the record player, and I handed each kid a balloon. But they just stood there looking at me. I thought, either the guy who wrote that party book is crazy, or I am. Show them how, Peter, my mother said. Take a balloon and demonstrate. I felt like one of the world's greatest living fools dancing around with a balloon, but it worked. As soon as the kids saw me doing it, they started doing it too. And the more they danced, the more they liked it, until Jenny's balloon popped. That nearly scared Sam right out of his mind. He started yelling and crying. Fortunately, I had blown up about 24 balloons. I was hoping they'd dance around for the rest of the afternoon. Fudge got the idea of jumping up and down on the furniture. The others liked that too. So instead of dancing with their balloons, that's what they did. And soon they were running from room to room, yelling and laughing and having a great time. Then the doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Rudder. She lives in the apartment right under us. She wanted to know what was going on. She said it sounded like her ceiling was about to crash in on her any second. My mother explained that Fudge was having a birthday party, and wouldn't she like to stay for a piece of cake? Sometimes my mother is really clever, so Grandma entertained Mrs. Rudder in the kitchen while Fudge and his buddies jumped up and down on his new bed. It was delivered this morning. Fudge hasn't even slept in it yet. So naturally, when my mother found out what they were up to, she was mad. Stop it right now, she said. New bed, big boy, Fudge told her. Was he proud? You won't have a new big boy bed for long if you don't stop jumping on it, my mother told him. I know, let's all sit down on the floor and hear a nice story. My mother selected a picture book from Fudge's bookshelf. I heard that one, Jenny said when she saw the cover. All right, my mother told her, let's hear this one. She held up another book. I heard that one too, Jenny said. I think my mother was starting to lose her patience, but she chose a third book and said, we'll all enjoy this one, even if we know it by heart. And if we do know it by heart, well, we can say it together. That's just what Jenny did. And when my mother skipped a page by mistake, Jenny was right there to remind her. If you ask me, my mother felt like biting Jenny by that time. When the story was over, it was 2 o'clock and Ralph was sound asleep on the floor. My mother told me to put him up on Fudge's new bed while she took the rest of the children back to the living room. I tried and tried, but I couldn't lift Ralph. So I left him sleeping on Fudge's floor and closed the door so he wouldn't hear any noise. On the way back to the living room, I wished the others would fall asleep too. Peter, my mother suggested, why don't you show them Dribble? Mom, Dribble's my pet. You don't go around using a pet to entertain a bunch of little kids. Didn't my mother know that? Please, Peter, my mother said. We've still got a half an hour left, and I don't know what to do with them anymore. Dribble, Fudge hollered. Dribble, dribble, dribble. I guess Sam and Jenny liked the way that sounded because they started to shout, dribble, 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 even though they didn't know what they were talking about. Oh, all right, I said, I'll show you Dribble, but you've got to promise to be very quiet. You mustn't make a sound. You might scare him. Okay, they all said. Okay, my mother went into the kitchen to chat with Grandma and Mrs. Rudder. I went into my room and came back carrying Dribble in his bowl. I put my finger over my lips to remind Fudge and his friends to be quiet. It worked. At first, nobody said a word. I put Dribble down on a table. Fudge and Sam and Jenny stood over his bowl. Oh, turtle, Jenny said. Yes, Dribble's a turtle. My turtle, I said. See, Fudge whispered. They can all see, I told Fudge. Nice turtle, Sam said. I wonder why he wasn't afraid this time. What does Dribble do, Jenny asked. Do? He doesn't do anything special, I said. He's a turtle. He does turtle things. Like what, Jenny asked. What was with this kid anyway? Well, I said, he swims around a little and he sleeps on his rock and he eats. Does he make? Jenny asked. Make, I said. Make a tinkle? Oh, well, sure, I guess so. Jenny laughed. So did Sam and Fudge. I make tinkles too. Want to see? Jenny asked. No, I said. See? Fudge laughed, pointing at Jenny. Jenny had a big smile on her face. Next thing I knew, there was a puddle on the rug. Mom! I hollered. Come quick! My mother dashed in from the kitchen. What, Peter? What is it? Just to look at what Jenny did, I said. What is that? My mother asked, eyeing the puddle. She made on the floor, I said, and on purpose. Oh, Jenny, my mother cried, you didn't. Did too, Jenny said. That was very naughty, my mother told her. You come with me. She scooped up Jenny and carried her into the bathroom. After that, Mom mopped up the puddle. Finally, the doorbell rang. It was 2:30. The party was over. I could hardly believe it. I was beginning to think it would never end. First, Ralph's mother came. She had to wake him to get him out of the apartment. Next, Jenny's mother came. Mom gave her Jenny's wet pants and a baggie. That was all she had to do. Jenny's mother was plenty embarrassed. Sam's mother came last, but he didn't want to go home. Now that he was used to us, I guess he liked us. He cried, More party, more! Another time, his mother said, dragging him out of our apartment by the arm. My mother flopped down in a chair. Grandma brought her 2 aspirins and a glass of water. Here, dear, she said, maybe these will help. My mother swallowed the pills. She held her head. 3 is kind of young for a party, I told my mother. Peter, Warren, Hatcher, my mother began. Yes, I asked. You are absolutely right. I flopped down next to my mother. She put her arm around me. Then we both watched Fudge work his new Jack-in-the-Box. Later, when my father came home, he said, How did the party go? My mother and I looked at each other, and we laughed. That's the end of Chapter 5.
Chapter 6, Fang Hits Town. In this chapter, the author talks about saddle shoes. If you're not sure what they are, you can Google an image of them. So, Fang hits town. Fudge liked his new bed a lot. There was just one problem. He fell out of it every night. By the 4th night, my mother and father got smart. They pushed the bed against the wall and surrounded the other side with chairs. Now there was no place for Fudge to fall. But every morning my mother found him curled up in one of the chairs. My father said they could have saved their money since Fudge was so happy sleeping in an old chair. On Saturday, we had to go to the dentist. He wanted to check Fudge's mouth again to make sure everything healed all right since his flying experience. Dr. Brown is an old friend of my father's. They went to school together. He's always saying he takes special good care of me and Fudge because we're chips off the old block. The old block being my father. His office is on the other side of the park. It's near Madison Avenue. My mother said we'd make a day of it. And wouldn't that be fun? I'd rather go to the movies with Jimmy Fargo, I told her. But we'll have such a good time, my mother said. The 3 of us will go out for lunch, and then we'll get new shoes for you and Fudge. I've been out to lunch with Fudge, I reminded her. Oh, he's growing up, Peter. He knows how to behave now. I'd still rather go to the movies with Jimmy. Well, you're coming with me, and that's that. I wasn't looking forward to my day, and Saturday morning is always the best day of the week. Every Saturday morning I clean out Dribble's bowl. Sometimes, if Fudge is very good, I let him watch. I do it in the bathroom. First, I take Dribble out of his bowl and let him crawl around in the tub. I'm afraid to put him down on the floor. Somebody might step on him. But in the tub, I know he's safe. Next, I take the rocks out of his bowl and wash them. The last thing I do is wash the bowl itself. I really scrub it. I even rinse it 2 or 3 times to make sure all the soap is out. When I'm done with that, I put the rocks back in and fill it with just the right amount of water. After I put Dribble back in his bowl, I feed him. Usually he goes right to sleep on his favorite rock. I guess running around in the bathtub really makes my turtle tired. Today I finished with Dribble just in time. My mother was rushing, mumbling about getting us to Dr. Brown's office in time for an appointment. When we were outside, we took the crosstown bus, then walked a few blocks to the office. As soon as the nurse saw Fudge, she said, "How is my favorite patient?" She gave him a hug and a little book to read. To me, she said, "Good morning, Peter." It burns me up the way people treat Fudge. He's not so special. He's just little. That's all. But someday he's going to be 9 years old, too. I can't wait until he is. Then he'll know there's nothing so great about him after all. Soon the nurse said, "Fudge, Dr. Brown is ready for you. Come with me now." Fudge took the nurse's hand. Dr. Brown has this rule about mothers in the examining room with kids. They're not allowed. Mothers are a big problem, Dr. Brown told me once. I agreed. I looked through a National Geographic magazine while I waited. After a few minutes, the nurse came out and whispered something to my mother. I looked up, wondering what was the big secret. Then my mother said, "Peter, Dr. Brown would like you to help him with Fudge." "Help him?" I said. "I'm no dentist." The nurse said, "Peter, dear, if you'll just come with me, I'm sure everything will work out fine." So I went with the nurse. "What do I have to do?" I asked her. "Oh, not much. Dr. Brown just wants you to show Fudge how you open your mouth and how he checks your teeth." "What do I have to do that for?" I asked. "I don't need a checkup yet. I just had one last month." "Your brother won't open his mouth this morning," the nurse whispered. "He won't?" I whispered back. "No, he won't," she said again. I thought that was pretty funny. I never considered refusing to open my mouth at the dentist's office. When he says open, I open. When we reached the examining room, Fudge was sitting in the big chair. He had a towel around his neck and he looked all ready for action. Dr. Brown was showing him lots of little things and explaining what he does with each one. Fudge kept nodding, but he wouldn't open his mouth. "Ah, Peter," Dr. Brown said when he saw me, "would you open your mouth so I can count your teeth?" That's what he tells little kids he's doing, counting their teeth. Little kids will believe anything. I went along with Dr. Brown's joke. I opened my mouth very wide, much wider than when I'm the real patient. He put his mirror in and said, "Wonderful teeth, just beautiful, a regular chip off the old block. Such a shame your brother can't open his mouth the way you do." "Can so," Fudge said. "No," Dr. Brown told him, "you can't open your mouth nearly as good as Peter." "Can so. See?" Fudge opened his mouth. "No, I'm sorry, Fudge," Dr. Brown said. "It's still not as good as Peter." So Fudge opened his mouth really wide. "Count teeth," he said. "Count Fudgy's teeth." "Well," Dr. Brown pretended to think about it. "Count," Fudge shouted. "Well," Dr. Brown said again, scratching his head, "I guess as long as you're here, I might as well count your teeth." So he checked Fudge's mouth. When he was through, Fudge said, "See, see, just like Peter." "Yes," Dr. Brown said, smiling, "I can see that. You're just like Peter." He gave me a wink. I liked the way Dr. Brown tricked Fudge into opening his mouth. So when he was through examining him, I whispered, "Couldn't you make Fudge some false teeth until his grown-up ones come in?" "No, he'll just have to wait," Dr. Brown said. "But he looks like he has fangs," I told him. "You better not say that in front of your mother," Dr. Brown said. "I know it. She's not too big on fangs." Dr. Brown thanked me for helping him. My mother made another appointment for Fudge, and the nurse kissed my brother goodbye, and we left. "That wasn't so bad, was it, Peter?" my mother said. It could have been worse," I admitted. We headed for Bloomingdale's where we get our shoes. There are 5 salesmen in the children's shoe department. 2 of them my mother doesn't like. She thinks they don't measure my feet carefully, that all they care about is selling shoes, even if they don't have the right sizes in stock. The other ones my mother thinks are okay, but there's one she likes a lot. His name is Mr. Berman. I like him too because he's funny. He usually makes believe that the right shoe goes on the left foot, or that Fudge's shoes are really for me. Anyway, when Mr. Berman waits on us, buying shoes is almost fun. Today, Mr. Berman spotted us right away. He always remembers our name. Well, if it isn't the Hatcher boys, he said. In the flesh, I told him. Fudge opened his mouth for Mr. Berman. See, all gone. His teeth, my mother explained to Mr. Berman. He knocked out his top 2 front teeth. Well, congratulations, Mr. Berman said. That calls for a celebration. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out 2 lollipops. He handed one to me and one to Fudge. Oh, Fudge said, lolly. Mine was root beer flavor. I hate root beer, but I thanked Mr. Berman anyway. I'll save it for after lunch, I told him, handing it to my mother. She put it into her purse. Fudge got a lemon lolly. He ripped off the paper and started sucking it right away. Now then, what'll it be, boys? Mr. Berman asked. My mother answered, brown and white saddles for Fudge and loafers for Peter. Okay, Peter, let's see how those feet have grown. I slipped out of my old shoes and stood up. I stuck my left foot into Mr. Berman's foot measure. Then he turned it around and I put my right foot in. That's another reason why my mother thinks Mr. Berman is good at selling shoes. He measures both feet. Some other salesmen only measure one. My mother says feet can be different sizes, even on the same person, and it's important to make sure the size fits the biggest foot. What color loafers, Peter? Mr. Berman asked. Brown, I said, same as my old ones. When Mr. Berman went into the back to look for shoes for me, my mother noticed a hole in the toe of my sock. Oh, Peter, why didn't you tell me you had a hole in your sock? I didn't know I had one, I said. Oh, I'm so embarrassed. It's my sock, Mom. Why would you be embarrassed? I asked. Well, it looks terrible. I mean, to come shopping for shoes with a hole in your sock, that's just awful. Can't you hide it a little? Where should I hide it? Try to get the hole in between your toes so it doesn't show, my mother said. I wiggled my sock around, trying to rearrange my hole. My mother sure worries about silly things. Mr. Berman came out with 2 pairs of loafers. He likes to try different sizes to make sure I'm getting the right one. One pair was much too big. The other pair fit fine. Wear or wrap? Mr. Berman asked my mother. Wrap, please, she said. We'll wear the old ones home. I have never been allowed to wear new shoes home from the store. Don't ask me why, but my mother always has the new pair wrapped up, and I can't wear them until the next day. When I was finished, Mr. Berman untied Fudge's shoes and measured his feet. Brown and white saddle shoes, my mother reminded him. Mr. Berman went into the back and returned his 2 shoe boxes. But when he opened the first box and Fudge saw the saddle shoes, he said, No! No what? My mother asked him. No shoes, Fudge said. He started kicking his feet. Don't be silly, Fudgy. You need new shoes, my mother told him. No, 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 he hollered. Everybody in the shoe department looked over at us. Here's the perfect size, Mr. Berman told Fudge, holding up one shoe. Wait till you see how nice these new shoes will feel. Fudge kicked some more. It was impossible for Mr. Berman to get the shoes on his feet. He screamed, No shoes! No, no, no! My mother grabbed hold of him, but he was wiggling all around. He managed to give Mr. Berman a kick in the face. Lucky for him, Fudge only had on socks. Now look, Fudge, my mother said, you must get new shoes. Your old ones are too small. So what kind do you want? I don't know why my mother bothered to talk to him like he was a regular person, because when Fudge gets himself into a temper tantrum, he doesn't listen to anyone. By that time, he had thrown himself onto the floor, where he beat his fists against the rug. What kind do you want, Fudge? Because we're not leaving here until you have new shoes, my mother said, like she meant it. I figured we'd be here for the rest of the day, or maybe the week. How could my mother have been embarrassed over a little hole in my sock and then act like nothing much was happening when her other son was on the floor yelling and screaming and carrying on? I'm going to count to 3, my mother told Fudge, and then I want you to tell me which shoes you want. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Fudge sat up. Like Peter's, he said. I smiled. I guess the kid really looks up to me. He even wants to wear the same kind of shoes. But everybody knows you can't buy loafers for such a little guy. They don't come in your size, Mr. Berman told Fudge. Yes, 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 like Peter's, Fudge hollered. Mr. Berman held up his hands and looked at my mother as if to say, I give up. But my mother said, I have an idea. She motioned for me and Mr. Berman to come closer. I had the feeling I wasn't going to like her idea, but I listened anyway. I think we'll have to play a little joke on Fudge, she said. What do you mean? I asked. Well, suppose Mr. Berman brings out a pair of saddle shoes in your size, and... Oh, no, I said, you're not going to get me to wear saddle shoes. Never. Let me finish, my mother said. Mr. Berman can bring them out, and you can try them on, and then Fudge will think that that's what you're getting. But when we leave, we'll take the loafers. That's mean, I said. You're taking advantage of him. Since when do you worry about that? My mother asked. Since now, I told her. Look, Peter, my mother said, checking her watch. It's 12 o'clock. I'm starved. Me too, I said. Well then, if you ever want to get some lunch, let's try my idea. Okay, I said. I sat back in my chair while Mr. Berman hurried to the stockroom again. Fudge looked up at me from his position on the floor. Like Peter's, he said. Yeah, sure, Fudge, I told him. Mr. Berman came back with a pair of brown and white saddle shoes in my size. I tried them on. Ugh, did they look ugly. See, Peter's nice saddle shoes, my mother said. Now Fudgy tries on his nice saddle shoes. Fudge let Mr. Berman get him into his new pair of shoes. See, he said, see, like Peter's. He held up a foot. That's right, Fudge, I said, just like mine. You sure can fool little kids easy. Wear or wrap? Mr. Berman asked my mother while Fudge walked around in his new shoes. Wrap, of course, she said. I wondered what my mother would tell Fudge tomorrow when I wore my new loafers. Oh well, that really wasn't my worry. It was her idea. When Fudge was back in his old shoes and our package was ready, Mr. Berman gave my brother a striped balloon. He offered one to me, too. I refused. How could he think a person in 4th grade might want a shoe store balloon? That wasn't so terrible, was it, Peter? My mother said as she left the store. It wasn't? I asked. Well, it could have been worse, my mother said. I suppose, I answered. We went to Hamburger Heaven for lunch. We sat in a booth. Fudge tossed his balloon around while my mother ordered for him and then for herself. I ordered my own lunch, a hamburger with everything on it, and a chocolate milkshake. Fudge was getting a kiddie special, meaning a hamburger without the roll, some mashed potatoes, and a side order of green peas. When our lunch was served, my mother cut Fudge's hamburger into tiny pieces, which he shoved into his mouth with his fingers. Then she handed him a spoon and told him to eat his mashed potatoes. But instead of eating them, he smeared them on the wall. See, he said, I thought you told me he wouldn't behave like that anymore, I said to my mother. Fudgy, that's naughty. You stop it right now, my mother said. But Fudgy sang, eat it or wear it, and he dumped the whole dish of peas over his head. I laughed. I couldn't help it. He looked so silly with the peas falling down from his hair, and when I eat and laugh at the same time, I choke. So I choked on my pickle and my mother had to whack me on the back, which gave Fudge another chance to spread mashed potatoes on the wall. That's when the waitress asked my mother, did we want anything else? No, thank you, my mother said. We have more than enough now. She wiped off the wall with her napkin and told Fudge he was very, very naughty. Not me, Fudge said. Not me. Yes, you, my mother told him. Why can't you eat like Peter? See how nice Peter eats? Fudge didn't say anything. He just stuck his fork into his balloon. It popped and he screamed, all gone! Want more balloon? More! Quiet, I told him. Can't you ever act human? That's enough, Peter, my mother said. She should have slugged him. That would teach that brother of mine how to behave in hamburger heaven. We took a cab home. Fudge fell asleep on the way. He had his fingers in his mouth and made his slurping noise. My mother whispered to me, our day wasn't that bad, was it, Peter? I didn't answer. I just looked out the taxi window and decided that I would never spend a day with Farley Drexel Hatcher again. And that's the end of our chapter. And I'd like to share the clue for our next reader. The clue is, this teacher uses a different language to communicate. It's not one you see often, but it's a pretty handy language. Good night.